Chapter 249 As Elder Huang examined Yi Qingtang. The other three outer sect elders were secretly observing the young girl before them as well. After a moment, Elder Huang then took the lead and asked, "What exactly happened in Spirit Condensation Mountain Village?" Yi Qingtang immediately let out the whole story. After her account, the four elders' expressions were not too good. Spirit Condensation Mountain Village was affiliated to Xinling sect. If the village master, Wu Chengze, really switched to worship the Blood Moon sect as Yi Qingtang said, it would be a humiliation to Xinling sect that could not be erased. If words were to spread about the affiliation with an orthodox sect that was infatuated with resurrecting an evil spirit, would it not attract ridicule? Elder Huang narrowed his eyes. He recalled Yi Qingtang's words, but did not find any suspicious areas. Moreover, Yi Qingtang was merely a new disciple and would not be bold enough to make up such an outrageous lie. But there was one point. "Yi Qingtang, you are a new disciple, but why would you go on a sect mission together with Zhou Xian and the rest?" asked Elder Huang without expressions. Yi Qingtang's appearance in this team itself was extremely illogical. Once he said that, the warden standing from a side immediately started breaking out in a cold sweat. Yi Qingtang glanced over the warden's pale expression, and a hint of laughter flashed past her eyes. "I am unaware as well. I listened to the warden's arrangement for everything. The warden told me to join senior brother Zhou's team, so that's what I did." Yi Qingtang's casual reply was but a huge rock on the warden's mind. The faces of all elders darkened, and Elder Huang even gave the warden a cold look. Should a new disciple be participating in the mission for Zhou Xian and the rest? The warden's face turned pale, and he hurriedly knelt down as cold sweat trickled down his body. "Since you can't even handle this properly, Xinling sect does not need such a useless person like you anymore. Leave the sect immediately," Elder Huang said emotionlessly, driving that warden out of Xinling sect. The warden's face turned green immediately. He had been through so many things and contributed so much to climb up to this outer sect warden position. Never had he thought that his career would be ended right now because of his greed of a moment. The warden wanted to plead for mercy but was immediately ordered to be sent away by Elder Huang. No one was allowed to break the sect rules. There was no emotion on Yi Qingtang's face as she watched the warden being forcefully carried away. From the start, she already knew that Zhou Xian bribed the warden, which was why the warden changed her team. It was obvious that the warden knew about Zhou Xian's intentions, but still handed her into Zhou Xian's hands for his own gains. Towards such a person, Yi Qingtang was not sympathetic at all. "We will send people to get to the bottom of this matter. Before the investigation is completed, both Lin Long and you should not take on any missions temporarily. If there is a need, we will summon you too for inquiry," said Elder Huang.
"Yes."
Yi Qingtang nodded. Elder Huang did not say anything further and let Yi Qingtang return first. Once Yi Qingtang left, the other three elders who had remained silent throughout finally said something. "This Yi Qingtang is rather mature and not like ordinary new disciples. I heard from the Rewards Pavilion warden previously that she beheaded a villain on the assassination roll by herself and thought that it was misinformation. Now, it seems that she is pretty good," praised the elder of the Outer Sect's Array faction as he watched Yi Qingtang's fading back view. Chapter 250. Pretty good? Elder Huang laughed faintly. Regardless of her nature, one is to speak with their skills in the sect. It is already not easy for Yi Qingtang to pass the sect assessment with such a spirit root. No matter how mature she is, her natural endowments are ultimately not sufficient. She can only be an outer sect disciple at most in this life, and will not have any fate with the inner sect. Amongst the four factions, only the sword faction had the greatest requirement regarding the spirit roots. No matter how outstanding Yi Qingtang's performance was, it was still useless to the sword faction. The Array faction elder frowned slightly, dissatisfied with Elder Huang's words. When the new disciples entered the sect, the elder from the Outer Sect's Array faction had already heard of such a girl from the Elder Qin of the Inner Sect's Array faction. From Elder Qin's tone, one could tell that he valued Yi Qingtang. However, because Yi Qingtang just entered the sect, Elder Qin suggested to observe her for a period of time before making the final decision. There should be more investigations regarding Spirit Condensation Mountain Village. If it is really related to the Blood Moon sect, It would be serious, the Fist faction said, returning to official matters. With that, the other three elders felt a weight on their minds. Thousands of years ago, the Blood Moon sect reigned supreme. Only after great effort from all sects in the world and deaths of many elites was the Blood Moon sect exterminated. If the Blood Moon sect was resurrected, chaos would definitely ensue. This matter is serious, and we will need to send people to investigate. We will have to heed the sect master's arrangements regarding the specific plans. When Yi Qingtang returned from where she met the elders and to her room, Lin Long happened to be in the room as well. Although Lin Long's face was slightly pale, she was in a better condition than before. Senior Sister Lin, how do you feel now? Yi Qingtang looked at Lin Long and asked. Lin Long replied, the elixirs you gave me before are pretty effective. The physician said that I only need to recuperate for a while to recover. The blood plague would destroy one's spirit root. The elixir that Yi Qingtang gave Lin Long to consume could protect the spirit root from being eroded. If her spirit root were broken, it would be difficult for Lin Long to progress any further in the future. That's good. Yi Qingtang smiled from the bottom of her heart. Lin Long looked at Yi Qingtang and said, it is all thanks to you. I still need to recuperate for a while for now, and while there isn't anything, Lin Long frowned slightly as disappointment filled her eyes. The inner sect assessment is 1 month from now. Given my current condition, I might not be able to participate in it. While Lin Long's tone was calm, but a hint of regret could still be heard from her words. The difference between the inner sect and outer sect was huge in a sect. To become truly powerful, the only way was to enter the inner sect. However, there was only one assessment for outer sect disciples to convert to inner sect disciples every year. Given Lin Long's current condition, it was probable that there was no way she could take part in it. Yi Qingtang heard Lin Long's words, and the expression in her eyes changed. Lin Long did not notice Yi Qingtang's emotions and continued. But you don't need to worry. It is still early for you. New disciples cannot participate in the inner sect assessment in their first year in the sect. You can use this 1 year plus to focus on cultivation and preparation for the coming year. Nevertheless, Yi Qingtang was unable to be as relaxed. Yi Qingtang's real goal of entering Xinling sect was to enter the inner sect, and only through entering the inner sect would she be able to narrow the distance between her and Yi Yu. Yi Yu was currently the final disciple of Yunxiao sect's sect master, but she was still merely an outer sect disciple of Xinling sect. The gap between the two of them was like a chasm. She must enter the inner sect in the shortest time possible. Chapter 251. Yi Qingtang set her mind to take part in the inner sect assessment this year, and what she needed now was to be given an exception to participate. A few days later, Yun Shu and the rest returned from their mission as well. The missions for new disciples were simpler, and there was not much difficulty when they attempted the missions together. Yun Shu obtained a pretty good treasure from the mission this time, which Yi Qingtang did hear him mentioning about briefly, though she did not ask what it was exactly. As more disciples returned from their missions, a tremendous change suddenly happened to the situation. Disciples that were out for missions did not return to the sect in the stipulated timing. It happened to only 1 or 2 teams initially, and Xinling sect was not too bothered. But as time was delayed, they strangely lost news of more and more disciples. Moreover, this did not only happen in the outer sect of Xinling sect. Disciples from the inner sect disappeared during missions as well. Then, Xinling sect sensed that something was off and immediately formed a group of elites in the sect to investigate the disappearance cases. Being ranked in the first 100 elites in the outer sect, Qin Huan was assigned in the group as well. Along with the other outstanding disciples in the outer sect, they were to set off to investigate those disappeared disciples. Just as Qin Huan was packing his bag and ready to leave, he suddenly saw Yi Qingtang standing outside his door from some time ago. The 2 disciples living with Qin Huan suddenly saw the beautiful junior sister at the door and instantly darted him a playful look. Qin Huan's face darkened and immediately chased the 2 away before inviting Yi Qingtang into the room carefully. Junior sister Yi, is there anything I can help with? Qin Huan looked at Yi Qingtang guiltily. He only heard that the missing silver wolf actually returned a few days ago and almost died from misery. He deeply felt that the silver wolf was simply fooling with him. Senior brother Qin, Are you going to investigate the disappearance of the sect disciples? Yi Qingtang went straight to the point. Qin Huan nodded and replied with a helpless expression. Yes, this matter is pretty blown up. I heard that not only Xinling sect's disciples disappeared for no reason, but the same thing also happened to the few sects nearby. Now, not just us but other sects have also sent disciples out to investigate. Qin Huan returned to his senses and said earnestly, Junior Sister Yi, it is not very peaceful recently. You should take on lesser rewarded missions. The sect will not assign any missions to you all in this 1 month anyway. Do remain in the sect and cultivate, lest you get into any accidents. Even inner sect disciples disappeared. God knows what exactly happened outside. The disciples sent out for this investigation were all elites from the inner and outer sects. Even disciples in the outer sect who were ranked below 1,000 were not deployed, much less disciples who just entered the sect like Yi Qingtang. Evidently, the sect took this matter seriously and was very meticulous in handling it. However, right after Qin Huan finished his sentence, Yi Qingtang suddenly smiled and said, Senior Brother Qin, there's something I wish to ask you for help with. Confusion was etched on Qin Huan's face. Please bring me along for this mission. Yi Qingtang grinned. The expression on Qin Huan's face turned to that of shock in an instant. You want to go? Yi Qingtang nodded. Qin Huan suspected whether Yi Qingtang had gone crazy. Junior Sister Yi, don't joke around anymore. This mission is not like any other. No one knows what kind of danger we will meet with. You shouldn't join. Qin Huan hurriedly waved his hands. Chapter 25:12 No, I must go this time. If you don't agree, I will look for Senior Brother Gu. Then, Yi Qingtang wanted to leave. Qin Huan hurriedly stopped her and said, Take it that I'm afraid of you. Senior Brother Gu's side is even more dangerous. What should I say about you? Qin Huan had a troubled expression on his face. He was aware of this junior sister's stubbornness, but no matter how, he really could not understand why Yi Qingtang wanted to join such a dangerous mission. Although the sect elders already said that they would be handsomely rewarded as long as they found any clues before the missions were allocated, this was at the cost of one's life. Why was this little girl so insistent on taking this risk? Agree or disagree? Yi Qingtang raised a brow slightly and did not intend to explain too much to Qin Huan. Xinling sect took this matter exceptionally seriously, and Yi Qingtang noticed this. The inner sect entrance assessment would take place 1 month later, and Yi Qingtang might not even have the chance to participate in the assessment as a new disciple. Thus, she must grasp every opportunity. If she could find any clues in this mission, perhaps she would have a chance to take part in the assessment as an exception. It was hence why Yi Qingtang specially rushed over. Qin Huan had no other choice but to brace himself and agree. But let me set this clear first. You must follow me tightly throughout this mission. Qin Huan could not help but warn her again. Yi Qingtang obviously nodded perfunctorily. Once they were on the mission, whatever she wanted to do was not what Qin Huan could control. Then do you want to make preparations first? Qin Huan asked. Yi Qingtang chuckled. I've prepared it a long time ago. The things are stored in my space ring. The corner of Qin Huan's lips twitched a little. He deeply felt that he seemed to have fallen into Yi Qingtang's trap. Qin Huan did not have time to argue with Yi Qingtang about it, and only hurried to the gathering point outside the sect along with her. There were already 7 to 8 people standing at the gathering point when they reached. Qin Huan brought Yi Qingtang over and said to the leading disciple, Senior Brother Dai, this is Yi Qingtang, Junior Sister Yi. She volunteered to participate in our mission this time. Dai Changming was tall and had a pretty face. His straight brows were slightly furrowed as he looked straight at Yi Qingtang, who was standing behind Qin Huan. Yi Qingtang? I've never heard of her. Is she ranked in the first 1,000 in the outer sect? Qin Huan's expression was a little awkward. He was about to say something, but someone was 1 step ahead of him. Yi Qingtang? Qin Huan, are you joking? She is a new disciple who just entered the sect for a month or so. What qualification does she have to participate in this mission? That voice was sharp with a hint of animosity. Qin Huan looked in the direction of the voice, and this took him aback slightly. Zhou Chu, with a face of dismay, appeared from behind Dai Changming. His devious eyes glared at Yi Qingtang resentfully. Frustration filled Qin Huan when he saw Zhou Chu before him. Zhou Chu happened to be ranked in the top 1,000 in the outer sect and was assigned on this mission as well. However, it did not cross Qin Huan's mind that Zhou Chu would actually be in the same team as him. Then, he could not help but look at Yi Qingtang behind him worriedly. Not long ago, Zhou Xian placed Yi Qingtang in his team because of his private grudge, but he himself died in the end. Zhou Chu was Zhou Xian's younger brother, and he already had a feud with Yi Qingtang. Now that they were actually going to be on the same team. Chapter 253. Qin Huan was really a headache now. Both Zhou Chu and Zhou Xian were stingy people. Zhou Xian always made things difficult for Yi Qingtang as he tried to take revenge for Zhou Chu. Now that Zhou Xian died, Zhou Chu definitely resented Yi Qingtang. Zhou Chu stared cruelly at Yi Qingtang. He blamed Yi Qingtang for Zhou Xian's death after knowing Zhou Xian died in a mission. Fighting between disciples was prohibited by the sect. If not because of that, he would have found trouble with Yi Qingtang much earlier. Seen your brother die, she is the new disciple this year. Not the top 1,000 in the outer sect. Zhou Chu hid his malice and explained to Dai Changming. Dai Changming frowned and gave a fierce look to Yi Qingtang. Qin Huan, what do you want? Dai Changming asked Qin Huan directly, as he did not even bother to question Yi Qingtang. Qin Huan was still figuring out how to convince Dai Changming, but Yi Qingtang spoke first. The sect elders said that the elites of the outer sect must join this mission. It's true that the top 1,000 disciples can't escape from it, but no one said that others can't join, right? Yi Qingtang's voice was clear, and her eyes were bright. She stared at Dai Changming, who had an unpleasant expression. Dai Changming's face darkened. Zhou Chu was about to mock at Yi Qingtang, but he then realized that it was a good chance for Yi Qingtang to leave the sect. He would then be able to take revenge for his brother. Zhou Chu did not say anything. Dai Changming was silent for a while and glanced at Yi Qingtang. It's up to you if you want to follow, but do not expect anyone to take care of you during the mission, he said and turned. Dai Changming's words were not very pleasant, but he allowed Yi Qingtang to join the team. Qin Huan sighed in relief. The rest of the disciples did not object since Dai Changming agreed. They did not care whether Yi Qingtang would follow them, as either way, none of them would help this new disciple. The mission this time was extremely difficult. They also need to be fully prepared. No one would bother if Yi Qingtang wanted to bring about her own death. The group of people then immediately walked down the path to heaven. Zhou Chu took a glimpse at Yi Qingtang before he turned away. His eyes were gloomy and cold. Qin Huan and Yi Qingtang walked at the back. I did not expect Zhou Chu to be in this team as well. Be more careful, junior sister Yi. Zhou Chu is very cunning. He definitely blamed Zhou Xian's death on you. Yi Qingtang smiled gently. Blamed on her? She had not yet finished the business with the brothers of the Zhou family. She would satisfy his desires if Zhou Chu wanted to die. Senior brother Qin, what's special about senior brother Dai? Yi Qingtang asked as she did not meet Dai Changming in her previous life. Qin Huan said softly, he is the number 10 on the honor roll list. He will be the leader of our team this time. Honor roll list? Yi Qingtang was a little stunned. The honor roll list that Qin Huan mentioned was the top ranking in the outer sect. There were only 10 people on the list. They were the strongest disciples in the outer sect. The top 3 could be compared with inner sect disciples for their abilities. No one dared to challenge them in the outer sect. This was the first time that Yi Qingtang had an encounter with a disciple on the honor roll list. Chapter 254. Sect disciples disappearing was a serious issue. The elders had informed them of the path those disciples took before they set off. They only needed to follow that path to find out any suspicious places. Deer City? Where is that? I have never heard of that before. Qin Huan read through the mission file. There were 3 outer sect disciples who went missing when they were assigned to Deer City for their mission. Deer City is a small town. It was a carnage site 1,000 years ago. There were wars and conflicts happening there all the time. Deer City was rebuilt and destroyed in wars again and again. It only settled down a few hundred years ago, Yi Qingtang explained casually. Qin Huan stared at her in surprise. How did this little girl know about all that? Zhou Chu turned to look at Yi Qingtang frequently along the way. His sight was gloomy. He did not have any chance to confront her as Dai Changming asked everyone to rush along the way. The team rode the horses for a few days, and a stretch of mountains appeared in front of them. The mountain was steep and blocked their way. Dai Changming and the rest came down from the horses. They frowned and stared at the mountains, a few hundred meters tall. We have to cross the stretch of mountains in order to reach Deer City. Dai Changming contemplated for a while. The mountain here is too steep for the horses. Get ready to climb up. Everyone's faces were overcast with sadness after Dai Changming's command. Horses could not climb up the mountains here. Even if they climbed by themselves, they might need to travel on foot for the road afterward. Everyone could only quietly begin preparations. They tied the horses at the side, rolled up their sleeves, and prepared to climb. The mountain was so steep that it was almost vertical. It was full of danger to climb by themselves. If they missed a step, they might just fall into the ridges. When everyone was just about to climb, they suddenly heard the horses' hooves from far. Two men in yellow were approaching the mountain on horses. Are they the disciples of the Wind Moon sect? Qin Huan was stunned as he saw the two men. They both wore yellow clothes. The design made it obvious that they belonged to the Wind Moon sect. Disciples from all sects went missing, and all sects sent disciples out for investigation. Yi Qingtang scanned them and captured the dragon pattern on their chest. She immediately knew their identities. The dragon pattern belonged to the Wind Moon sect, and only inner sect disciples would have the patterns of their respective sects. These two men were the Wind Moon sect's inner sect disciples. Dai Changming and the rest also noticed that. The investigation was carried out not only by the inner and outer sects, but also by the respective elders. It was normal to meet inner sect disciples from other sects. The two disciples of the Wind Moon sect reached the front of the mountain. One of the young men took a glance at Yi Qingtang and the group, but he appeared to not notice them at all as he looked straight at the youth beside. The youth was still a child that was at most 12 or 13 years old. His face was still pure and innocent. Junior brother, you seldom leave the sect. Going on the mission this time will let you go through some training. We will only need at most half a day to reach Deer City after crossing this stretch of mountains, the young man said and smiled. Chapter 255. The youth's sight landed on the mountains that were at least a few hundred meters in height. His face suddenly tensed, and he asked nervously, "Senior brother, are we going to climb the mountain?" His voice was filled with childishness and bewilderment. The young man chuckled. "Climb the mountain? That's not necessary at all. We will have to travel on foot if we climb over the mountain now." The youth bit his lips and did not know what to do. The two of them were chatting as if they had never seen Yi Qingtang and the group of people there. However, none of the people from the Xinling sect dared to have any reaction. The opposite side was Wind Moon sect's inner sect disciples, and they were just the outer sect disciples. The difference between inner and outer sects was immense. They did not feel that it was inappropriate to be neglected. The difference was meant to be like that. The young man noticed the bewilderment on the youth's face, and he was more amused. "Junior brother, do you still remember the Linyue sword moves that Master taught you half a month ago?" The youth nodded timidly. The young man then lifted his hand and pointed to the stretch of mountains. "Today you will use the moves to split the mountain." Zhou Chu and the rest were stunned when they heard what the young man just said. Split the mountain? Everyone looked at the innocent youth. They could not make the connection between splitting the mountain and the youth in front of them. However, the youth hesitated for a moment, but he came down from the horse when he saw the young man's seriousness. The little hand pulled out the sword by his waist slowly. The little guy that seemed to be weak and vulnerable suddenly waved his sword the next second. A violent wind gathered around him as he waved the sword. All of a sudden, a sword breath was concentrated on the sword, and he immediately swung his sword towards the mountain. The intangible sword breath rushed downwards. A streak of cool light emerged, and the sword breath that was formed by the wind smashed onto the mountain. Within a second, a huge crack appeared on the steep mountain. Millions of cracked stones flew into the stretch of ridges. A direct path was split out. The scene really shocked Zhou Chu and the rest. They looked at the vulnerable youth again. If they did not witness that with their own eyes, they would never believe the move was done by such a young man. "Is this okay?" Senior brother? The youth did not notice the gazes on him. He just turned to ask his senior brother. The young man squinted his eyes and said, "Not too bad, but you are still not very familiar with the moves. I will teach you again when we return to the sect." The youth nodded and climbed up the horse. The two of them then casually went towards the path that was just created. Qin Huan sighed heavily as the two people left. I know that the difference between the inner and outer sect is huge, but this is the first time that I actually experienced how terrifying the difference is. Qin Huan was astonished. He always thought that his ability was not too bad, but it was incomparable to the youth from the inner sect of the Wind Moon sect. How old is that child? At most 12 or 13 years old. How can he be so strong? One of the Xinling sect disciples shivered. They only understood how horrible it was for them to never be able to close the gap. The power that was able to split the mountain with one sword was extremely ferocious. Chapter 256. Even such a young child can acquire such power after entering the inner sect. That is really amazing, Dai Changming said. Though he is young, he must possess a high-quality spirit root. If not, his age does not meet the requirements to enter the inner sect. I think he is accepted by the inner sect elders as an exception since his spirit root is superior. Zhou Chu sighed in awe and looked towards Yi Qingtang, who remained silent throughout. He purposely stressed the words when he mentioned the spirit root. Dai Changming nodded in agreement. The inner sect selection will be held in a month's time. Senior brother Dai, you are strong enough to enter the inner sect and will have the chance to level up, Zhou Chu said. Dai Changming was expressionless. The inner sect examination was extremely strict. It was not that easy to pass. However, the move that was done by the youth from the Wind Moon sect's inner sect did shock everyone there. They were still immersed in astonishment after a while. Inner sect disciples. This was the target of millions of outer sect disciples. Only after you entered the inner sect, you would gain access and be exposed to the unimaginable power. Yi Qingtang stared at the back view of the two disciples with a heavy heart. This was the ability of inner sect disciples. Yi was at an even higher status than inner sect disciples. If she did not hurry, the distance between her and Yi would be greater. She must get the opportunity to join the inner sect examination in a month's time. After some adjustments, Dai Changming and the group rushed towards Deer City through the path. Many disciples could not help but raise their heads to see the sky through the narrow gap between mountains. They had no idea when they could acquire such power. However, it was extremely difficult to enter the inner sect. While thinking of such thoughts, the group hurried on. The path created by the two young men saved quite a lot of time for Yi Qingtang and the team. The group figured out that both they and the Wind Moon sect disciples were heading towards the same destination through the chat between the two young men. Though no one mentioned that, everyone knew that if they really encountered them again, they could only back off. Their abilities added up would still not able to be compared with the youth's one move. Dai Changming also slowed down the pace. After half a day, the sky darkened, and they saw the city that connected the desert and the plains away from them by just a few hundred meters. The size of Deer City was not huge. The sand blown by the wind from the desert covered the entire city. The city was dimmed under the dust. Qin Huan wanted to say something, but once he opened his mouth, the sand went in. He could only keep his mouth shut. The sand and the wind is too strong. We will hurry and enter the city. Once we enter, find a place to rest. We'll start the investigation tomorrow morning. Dai Changming frowned. No one had any objections, and they rushed towards Deer City. When they entered, the tall walls blocked off the sand and the wind. Everyone then sighed in relief. Yi Qingtang shook off the sand on her clothes and came down from the horse with the rest. Dai Changming was planning to find a place to rest. However, after he wiped off the dust on his face, he realized there was not a single person on the street of Deer City. Chapter 257. Where are the people here? Zhou Chu scanned through the city. There was nothing on the street besides dust that was blown by the wind. The whole city was deadly silent. Yi Qingtang frowned and glanced at the empty street. Just now, she did not notice anything as she was trying to avoid the sand. However, now, She could feel that the whole city was surrounded by a layer of an abnormal breath. "Try to knock the doors," Dai Changming said to others. Some disciples tried to knock the locked doors along the street. However, there was no one answering the doors. The whole street was peculiar. Is it possible that they all stayed in the cellar to hide from the recent sandstorms? One of the disciples suspected. Dai Changming did not reply and quietly led the team forward to look for people. However, they smelled blood after taking a few steps forward. Everyone's faces darkened. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes and saw a sword on the street a few meters apart. There was a pool of fresh blood beside the sword. Yi Qingtang immediately went forward and held the sword. She was shocked when she took a glimpse at it. "This belonged to the youth of the Wind Moon sect," Yi Qingtang said. Her words caught Dai Changming's attention. All of them saw the pool of blood on the ground. Apparently, it was left here not long ago. What happened? Why is the sword here? The blood stain. Qin Huan felt that something was ominous. Yi Qingtang was alarmed. The ability of the two inner sect disciples of the Wind Moon sect was unbelievable. However, one of their swords and a pool of blood were left here. Sect disciples would never leave their weapons unless they had no choice. What exactly happened? What's wrong here? Dai Changming's face was unpleasant. Suddenly, Yi Qingtang's eyes sparkled. She raised her head and looked around. She could sense a streak of an evil breath surrounding Deer City gradually. It was like a nightmare falling under the dusk. Something is not right. "Senior brother Dai, we need to leave this place immediately." Yi Qingtang suddenly spoke. Dai Changming stunned. "Leave now? Both the wind and the sand are so strong. Where can we go?" Zhou Chu stared at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang did not even bother about Zhou Chu. She raised the sword in her hand and said, "The two people from the Wind Moon sect might be involved in some accident." Dai Changming frowned heavily. He looked towards the storm outside the city and glanced at the sword in Yi Qingtang's hand. "Leave the city now," he commanded. No one knew what the two disciples of the Wind Moon sect had encountered. However, no matter what they encountered, if even they could not defend themselves, the outer disciples would not even have a chance. All disciples ran towards the horses at the entrance of the city without hesitation. However, the horses suddenly screamed and ran outside the city at the same time. It seemed that they were shocked and insane. Chapter 258. A layer of red fumes surrounded the entrance of the city almost instantly. The horses that were running froze when they hit the blood fog, as if they were controlled by a particular force. Immediately, the horses were crushed into pieces by the blood fog in front of everyone's eyes. The horses screamed as they were torn apart into pieces. Everyone's noses were filled with the smell of blood. Dai Changming and the rest were pale when they witnessed the bloody scene. "What? What is that?" Zhou Chu shivered in fear. Witnessing death in front of his eyes was like a nightmare. Yi Qingtang's face clouded. She scanned through her surroundings, and the force that she sensed just now had evolved into layers of blood fog and enclosed the entire city. The moment she saw the blood fog, an ominous feeling arose in her heart. She had seen the blood fog before, back when the heretic spirit appeared in the Spirit Condensation Mountain Village. Now, the same blood fog appeared in Deer City. Yi Qingtang could not help but think of the terrible thing when the whole city was haunted and empty. The Blood Moon sect. If it was really the Blood Moon sect, Yi Qingtang tensed. She took out the soft jade and crushed it immediately while everyone was stunned. Qin Huan was shocked when he saw Yi Qingtang's actions. The soft jade was given by the sect elders to each disciple before they set off for the mission. Once they discovered anything, they would crush it, and the elders would find their way over. The one that Yi Qingtang held was given by Qin Huan halfway in case of emergency. However, Yi Qingtang crushed it. Did she discover something? Before he could ask, a gloomy breath spread out suddenly. The light from the dusk pierced through the blood fog, and the whole Deer City was blood red. Everyone felt strongly disturbed. "Be cautious." Dai Changming suppressed his fear. He pulled out his sword and reminded the rest. Everyone held their breaths and pulled out their swords nervously. They gathered around Dai Changming and glanced around. Crack. A cracking sound came from their back. They turned their head in panic, but they saw that A hanging board was blown away by the wind and fell onto the ground. "Do not scare yourself," Dai Changming warned. Everyone sighed in relief. However, when they turned back, a silhouette appeared a few meters away all of a sudden. All of them trembled in fear just by glancing at the silhouette. Their eyes were opened wide. A dry figure entered their sight. It was a monster that could not be described as a human. His skin was completely dried up throughout the body, as if all the water had evaporated under the sun. The dark red and dry skin was wrinkled and stuck to the bone tightly. It was like a dry corpse, a horrifying creature. On that dry face, a pair of red eyes was staring deadly at all of them. The pair of eyes in the sunken eye socket was as dreadful as the evil spirit. Chapter 259 Blood Moon Sect Elder One wobbled in fear, and the hand which wielded a sword could not stop trembling. A disciple suddenly saw the dried corpse's glabella and was shocked. All color faded from his face in an instant. "It's the Blood Moon Sect." Horror could be heard from the disciple's voice, while fear filled his eyes. Blood Moon Sect? Everyone turned pale upon hearing the name. That disciple's body stiffened as he locked his eyes on the blood moon symbol on the corpse's glabella. His voice began trembling as well. "My ancestors once told me about a legend. Thousands of years ago, the Blood Moon Sect was formed, and it committed countless massacres and spread fear around the world. The Blood Moon Sect then was the first heretic sect. Its members were exceptionally fierce and possessed the abnormal power of immortality, bringing utter misery to everyone in the world. In the Blood Moon Sect, the elders would have a Blood Moon Sect symbol on their glabella. Then, the disciple raised his stiff hand and pointed at the gruesome and frightening corpse. In the center of that corpse's forehead, there was a symbol of a red, bleeding crescent right at its glabella. "That is a Blood Moon Sect elder?" Even Dai Changming's voice could not help but be mixed with fear when mentioning this matter. Apart from its heretic cultivation technique of immortality, the Blood Moon Sect could induce terror in everyone for thousands of years because of its overbearing power. Legend had it that anyone of an elder level in the Blood Moon Sect could easily wipe out any sect. They were able to annihilate countries and exterminate sections. As such, the three words Blood Moon Sect at that time represented death and destruction. Even now, thousands of years after the extermination of the Blood Moon Sect, this terror still remained in everyone's hearts. Never would Dai Changming and the rest think that they would actually encounter a Blood Moon Sect elder. How was this something normal outer sect disciples like them could deal with? At that moment, everyone realized why the sword of that youth from Wind Moon Sect was left behind here. They were afraid that those two people from Wind Moon Sect had long become ghosts by the hands of the Blood Moon Sect elder. In front of the Blood Moon Sect elder, even a highly gifted inner sect was as minuscule as an ant. Yiqingtang frowned deeply as she stared at the forehead of the Blood Moon Sect elder not far away. Previously, she was not even able to battle the evil spirit that she encountered at Spirit Condensation Mountain Village. Now if the dried corpse before her was actually an elder of the Blood Moon Sect, the chances of winning were even more non-existent. The disappearance of disciples from various sects was most likely related to the resurrection of the Blood Moon Sect. Knowing everything now was already too late. The image of the tragic death of the few horses previously was deeply imprinted in everyone's hearts. The entire Deer City was already shrouded in blood fog. How could their bodies of flesh pass through that blood fog, which was able to crush every living thing into pieces? Despair filled everyone's minds at that instant. In the dead silence of despair, the Blood Moon Sect elder swept his scarlet eyes across the group of sect disciples before him. Its dry lips parted a little, and an almost illusory sound floated into everyone's minds like a nightmare. Submission or death. The ghastly and low voice was completely not what a human could make. That shudder that reached their hearts sent a chill down the spines of all disciples present. Submission or death. We are a sect from the Orthodox. How would we submit to a heretic sect? A disciple suppressed the fear in him and declared suddenly. Chapter 260. The Blood Moon sect elder landed his eyes on the disciple freakishly. His red, bleeding eyes were like that of a demon, inducing fear in people. So you choose death. Yi Qingtang saw that there was something wrong with the situation and hurriedly pulled the senior brother back. With a slightly pale complexion, she said in a low voice, "Senior brother, don't act rashly." The disciple felt his blood turn cold after being looked at by the Blood Moon sect elder. The righteousness in him was slowly swallowed away by the immense despair and fear. He clenched his teeth in secret, but never spoke again. The Blood Moon sect elder slowly moved his eyes away, and his almost illusory voice sounded again. "There is a fine line between your life and death. You will live should you submit, or die should you resist." His harrowing tone exuded an immense pressure, shrouding everyone's mind. Cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. As everyone was struggling and hesitating, Yi Qingtang suddenly frowned. She glanced across the senior brothers around her, but saw that everyone's faces were a pale white and were extremely terrified. She looked at the Blood Moon sect elder who was standing high above the masses without alerting anyone, and a strange feeling emerged in her heart. "Junior sister Yi?" Qin Huan quickly asked in a soft voice upon sensing Yi Qingtang's reaction. Yi Qingtang frowned and said, "Senior brother Qin, if the Blood Moon sect was really that powerful, why would it give us a chance to make a choice?" Yi Qingtang had a feeling that there was something wrong with the behavior of this Blood Moon sect elder. In the eyes of the Blood Moon sect elder, their existence was simply like that of an ant. Why would there be a room for choice? Even when Yi Qingtang met the evil spirit at Spirit Condensation Mountain Village, she could not even catch a breath as the evil spirit was not even willing to say anything to them and just exterminated everyone. However, the Blood Moon sect elder before them repeatedly gave them a chance to make a choice. Yi Qingtang really found this strange. Qin Huan went blank a little after listening. "Are you saying that this Blood Moon sect elder may not be as powerful as what we think?" Yi Qingtang nodded slightly. Although she had some guesses in her mind, she did not dare to take any actions rashly. If there was any mistake in her reasoning, death was their only fate, and there would be no chance to prove her guesses. However, this whisper fell into the ears of another disciple from aside. Turning to look back at the Blood Moon sect elder, he realized that while it felt exceptionally powerful, it did not plan on attacking them. His heart skipped a beat. If this Blood Moon sect elder was merely putting on a false show of strength, that was a Blood Moon sect elder. If he could kill it, it would be a great contribution to the sect. Even entering the inner sect as an exception would not be an issue. Then, the disciple made up his mind. Quietly taking a deep breath, he walked out from the group of disciples. Yi Qingtang and the rest were taken aback as they did not expect the disciple to actually walk towards the Blood Moon sect elder. Seeing that, their expressions changed. Instinctively, Qin Huan wanted to stop that disciple but was pulled back by Yi Qingtang, who quietly shook her head. However, the disciple walked straight to stand before the Blood Moon sect elder with a humble attitude and suddenly knelt down in front of everyone. "I am willing to submit to the Blood Moon sect." The Blood Moon sect elder narrowed his eyes. Dai Changming and the rest turned pale. However, just as everyone thought that the disciple chose to submit in fear of the Blood Moon sect elder's authority, the disciple suddenly drew out a sword when the Blood Moon sect elder narrowed its eyes. As the sword glimmered, he immediately stabbed towards the Blood Moon sect elder's chest, using his fastest speed with an urgent yearning in his eyes. Chapter 261. Everyone was surprised by the disciple's sudden attack. However, the moment the disciple lunged towards the Blood Moon sect elder with the sword, the expression in its eyes changed. It lifted a hand and smashed the sword that was nearing its chest. His face was filled with horror. Before he could react, the Blood Moon sect elder's dry lips contorted into a grotesque smile, and a red glint flashed across its eyes. It suddenly struck out a hand, which appeared like a casual movement, but it directly hit the disciple's chest. When its palm landed, a tremendously violent force penetrated into the disciple's chest immediately. In that instant, that disciple's body was torn into pieces with just a slap from Blood Moon sect elder, as though he was being ripped apart by a gust of fierce wind. Before everyone's eyes, hot blood mixed with pieces of flesh spattered onto the disciples, and that warm touch caused everyone's hearts to tighten. Fresh blood gushed out everywhere, and some of it spattered on the Blood Moon sect elder as well. The warm blood trickled down its chapped flesh and seeped into its skin. A heinous laugh escaped the Blood Moon sect elder's mouth as it glanced across the group of disciples before him with a devilish red glint in his eyes. Biting off more than you can chew. I will give you all a last chance. Do you choose to submit to the Blood Moon sect, or turn into ashes like him? The deep voice rang in everyone's ears and struck an extreme fear in everyone's hearts as if it contained a demonic force. Everyone felt as though they were struck by lightning, and a weighty boulder crushed their minds. Immense fear filled them. With a loud boom, the Xinling sect suddenly fell on their knees after hearing the demonic voice. Big beads of sweat trickled down their foreheads continuously, wetting the mud around their knees. It was also at this instant when Yi Qingtang felt her body vibrate violently when the Blood Moon sect elder's voice entered her ears. An unusual feeling seemed to be eroding her willpower. She clenched her fists tightly and made a cut in her palm with her nails, using pain to forcefully dispel the bewitching voice away. This Blood Moon sect elder's voice had the power of bewitching minds. Yi Qingtang clenched her teeth as she watched her senior brothers kneeling on the ground with an extremely terrified expression on their faces. Then, she quietly consumed a few bottles of elixirs which could conceal her breathing and swiftly dodged into a narrow alley, while the Blood Moon sect elder's attention was focused on the people who were kneeling down. In the next second, the group whose hearts were devoured by immense despair knelt before the Blood Moon sect elder. They lowered their heads in fear, and their voices trembled. We are willing to submit to the Blood Moon sect. A devilish red glint flickered in the Blood Moon sect elder's scarlet eyes. He lifted a hand slightly, and two zombies that had lost all consciousness walked out from a small cottage nearby. Those two zombies directly brought the disciples, who were suffering a mental breakdown, into a deep corner in Deer City. The Blood Moon sect elder glanced over at the pale disciples, and suddenly, his eyes sharpened. There was one missing. The Blood Moon sect elder swept his eyes across the deserted streets. In the dark alley, Yi Qingtang stuck close to the wall and concentrated on holding her breath, praying that those bottles of elixirs could allow her to escape this calamity. The Blood Moon sect's scarlet eyes landed on the small alley that Yi Qingtang was hiding in, but ultimately, he did not sense any breathing. A fish would not be able to slip through the net. No one would be able to escape this sealed Deer City. Chapter 262. Then, the Blood Moon sect elder turned and left. Sensing that the powerful aura of the Blood Moon sect elder had faded away, Yi Qingtang finally heaved a sigh of relief, but her heart was hanging in midair. She crushed a nephrite in her hand. She did not know when would the elders arrive. The entire Deer City was already sealed off by the blood fog. If they tried to escape, they would probably end up like those horses. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and fixed her emotions. There was evidently a power in the Blood Moon sect elder's last sentence which stunned people. Just looking at the reactions of Qin Huan and the rest, one could tell how scary that overbearing force was. At that instant, Yi Qingtang was extremely grateful that she possessed the heart of the demon god, as it gave her a certain level of resistance against the bewitching force. But at present, Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. She personally witnessed how ruthless the evil spirit in Spirit Condensation Mountain Village was. Even the people from Spirit Condensation Mountain Village who pledged loyalty to it ultimately turned into zombies. To a spirit that needed essence for resurrection, sect disciples, who were full of spirit energy, were obviously the best offerings. An image of Qin Huan floated into Yi Qingtang's mind. Qin Huan was also brought away by the Blood Moon sect elder. If she left him alone, she was afraid. Yi Qingtang clenched her teeth and immediately shuffled out. On the empty street, there were only the remains of the rash disciple. Yi Qingtang followed everyone's footsteps and cautiously concealed her traces. The evening glow was consumed by the night, and crimson blood fog shrouded the city pond. The faint moonlight penetrated through the blood fog and scattered on the ground as though the entire Deer City was soaked in fresh blood. The circular square in Deer City was brightly illuminated, and standing torches lit the entire square. As the flames flickered, one could see metal cages surrounding the square and the despondent sect disciples locked in the cages. In the center of the square, an unsightly corpse was hung on a huge wooden stand. The corpse had an obvious sect uniform on it. However, at this instant, that sect disciple was already dead. Its body was dismembered while the organs were already dug out and piled under its legs. Large patches of blood stained the ground of the square, and many dead bodies were stacked near every metal cage. Taking a look across, this place was as terrifying as a living hell on earth. Qin Huan and the rest were separately locked into the metal cages by the two zombies. Only despair and fear remained on their faces, and there were no traces of resistance at all, as though all courage was drawn out from them. Yiqingtang shuffled to a roof nearby and used the darkness to hide herself. She took in the situation in the square as a suffocating smell of blood flooded into her nose. Sweeping a glance over, there were over 10 sect disciples locked in the metal cages. Even the pair of disciples from Wind Moon sect were locked up, and it was evident that they sustained huge injuries. The number of sect disciples that were already killed was countless. Yiqingtang's heart sank, and she felt extremely stifled. The so-called submission that the Blood Moon sect elder said was simply a pretense. From the start to the end, all he wanted was to absorb the essence of these sect disciples. Chapter 263. The Blood Moon sect elder placed his hands behind him. Standing right in the middle of the square, he looked at the corpse hanging on the wooden stand and lifted his hands slightly. After locking the Xinling sect disciples up, the two zombies immediately dragged out another sect disciple from the other cage. "Let me off. I beg you. I am willing to pledge loyalty to Blood Moon sect. Let me live. I am willing to do anything." Clearly, that disciple was frightened out of his wits by everything that happened before. When he was grabbed by the zombies, his face turned shockingly pale, and he begged for mercy wildly in hopes of obtaining a way out to keep his life. However, the two zombies still held him tightly and brought him to the Blood Moon sect elder. For the entire time, the disciple seemed to have forgotten about resisting and was only begging vainly. Yiqingtang frowned at this sight. Among these disciples, there were some inner sect disciples from different sects who were clearly highly skilled, but now, Yiqingtang could not help but recall the Blood Moon sect elder's demonic voice, which made one lose all fighting spirit. Under that voice, everyone would be bewitched, and their despair would be enlarged. People feared heretic sects not only because of their might, but more of the insidious methods that were unavoidable. A plaintive wail rang in the air. The corpse on the wooden stand was already taken down, and the howling sect disciple was immediately tied on it. The Blood Moon sect elder slowly walked up, and its dry arms gradually closed in on the disciple's chest like a resuscitated mummy. Qin Huan and the rest, who were locked in the metal cage, suddenly returned to their senses. Their hairs stood on end when they witnessed the terrifying sight. However, before they knew what was going on, a miserable cry slit through the air. The sharp nails of the Blood Moon sect elder directly pierced through the disciple's chest, and all 10 fingers were sunk into the flesh. In the next second, he suddenly pulled his hands apart, and the sound of flesh being ripped apart jabbed everyone's eardrums. The disciple was torn right apart by the Blood Moon sect elder just like that. Shrill cries escaped his mouth continuously. He stretched his neck, and veins stood out on his neck. His eyes were widened to the extreme. Blood gushed out from the wound, and intestines that were mixed with blood fell all over the ground. Yet, when all of this was happening, he was still alive. The Blood Moon sect elder looked at the intense color of blood and narrowed his eyes in satisfaction. He immediately held the fresh, beating heart of the sect disciple and dug it out from the disciple's living body. After a cry, the disciple whose heart was dug out finally let out his final breath in this torture. His highly held head drooped down, and the place fell into a dead silence at that instant. The bloody scene played out before everyone's eyes, and the extremely brutal image shocked everyone thoroughly. The blood moon sect looked at the bright red heart in his bloody palm, and his chapped lips tugged up slightly. In the next second, he opened his mouth, and his white teeth chomped on the heart. One mouth, and another. As he chewed, fresh blood seeped in and out of his mouth, and his dried face appeared sinister to the extreme. He is eating hearts. Aren't we going to? Zhou Chu was completely frightened out of his wits after witnessing the scene. He fell on the ground with a loud crash, and the terror in his eyes was almost out of control. This was over. This was all over. He was going to die. When the two zombies opened the gate to pull the youth out, the senior brother suppressed his fear and pushed away the two zombies. "Don't touch my junior brother." The pale young man's face was full of cold sweat. He stood straight, protecting the youth behind him. Chapter 265. The youth trembled in fear, and his eyes were full of tears. The elder of the Blood Moon sect squinted his eyes. He smiled as he looked at the young man. He walked slowly to the cage and stared at him in a superior way. When the young man's sight met with the elder's one, he could feel the fear spreading through his body. His face was paler, and the hands that were shielding the youth shivered. Suddenly, the elder of the Blood Moon sect smashed his hand at the young man's chest. The 5 fingers pierced through his chest. A screech exploded from the young man's mouth. A beating heart was dug out by the elder's hand the next second. The young man's body collapsed, and blood flowed out from the wound on his chest. /BOXNOVEL. The youth behind stared at the familiar figure in shock. He cried desperately as his senior brother lost all his breath. However, this was not the end yet. The elder of the Blood Moon sect chewed the heart in front of the youth's empty gaze. The mouth that was filled with blood was tilted to an angle. "Don't be overconfident of your ability." The elder threw out a few disdainful words. He did not even look at the dead young man on the ground. Instead, he looked straight at the youth who fell down in horror. Yi Qingtang, who was hiding in the dark, witnessed the bloody scene. When she saw the elder dig out the young man's heart, she could not help but take a cold breath. However, the cold breath exposed herself. The elder, who was about to target the youth, suddenly sensed the breath. He turned his head, and his sight was fixed at the direction where Yi Qingtang was at. The gloomy smile appeared on his face again. "Found you." He gave up on attacking the youth as he spoke and immediately dashed towards Yi Qingtang's direction. Yi Qingtang was shocked. She turned and escaped as the elder was approaching her swiftly. "Damn it!" Qin Huan and the rest, who were in the cage, stared at the two figures in surprise. "It's junior sister Yi." Qin Huan held the bar of the cage worriedly and witnessed the two figures disappearing from his sight. Why did she come over? Dai Changming frowned and felt worried as well. It was lucky that she could hide herself previously. She should have gone somewhere safe. Ha ha ha. She can't escape now. No one can escape. The elder of the Blood Moon sect has found her. She will definitely die. Zhou Chu laughed viciously. If he could not survive, Yi Qingtang must die as well. /BOXNOVEL. Everyone stared at him in rage when they heard his malicious curse. Qin Huan held him up in fury and punched his face. "Junior sister Yi belongs to the same sect as us. Zhou Chu, what are you up to?" Zhou Chu did not feel irritated even though he was punched. He just covered his face and cursed again. How could she run away? Don't daydream anymore. The moment when we stepped into Deer City, no one could make it out alive. However, Yi Qingtang will die in front of us now. Chapter 266. Even though Zhou Chu's words were resentful, no one could argue back. The blood fog that surrounded Deer City had cut off their route of retreat. Who could make it out alive from the hell on earth? It would be the path to death eventually. However, this path was not what Yi Qingtang wanted. Yi Qingtang fled in all directions under the darkness. The wind howled beside her ears, but now she could not relax at all. The elder of the Blood Moon sect was chasing behind her. He was like a dead ghost, chasing for her life and getting closer and closer. Yi Qingtang was finding the way out continuously in the darkness. Her tiny body was agile and fled everywhere. She ran on top of a roof and jumped to the ground. Yi Qingtang used almost all ways that she had for escaping from her previous life. However, no matter where she fled to, she could not leave Deer City. When she reached the edge of the wall, she wanted to climb up instinctively. However, when she looked up at the blood fog, this last hope also disappeared. Her heart tensed. It was impossible to escape when the whole city was isolated by the blood fog. Run. Why did you stop running? The gloomy voice came from her back. Yi Qingtang turned instantly. The elder of the Blood Moon sect stared deadly at her under the red moonlight. Yi Qingtang felt her heart hanging in the midair. Her right hand held the sword by her waist tightly. The elder of the Blood Moon sect was not in a hurry to kill the fish out of the net. His gaze was fixed on the pale young woman, as if he wanted to make fun of his prey. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes and looked at the ferocious elder of the Blood Moon sect. Run. There was no way to run. Death. That was not the ending she wanted. Yi Qingtang took a heavy breath and pulled out her sword. The elder of the Blood Moon sect raised his eyebrows. His eyes were full of sarcasm as he witnessed Yi Qingtang's movements. Yi Qingtang wiped off all the nervousness in her eyes and forced herself to be calm. If she could not run away, she would fight for her life. She would not blame anyone whether she survived or died. She had gone through the millions of sufferings in her previous life, as she always fought until the last minute. She knew that her ability could not be compared with the elders at all. However, even she knew that it would not work. She would try her best to fight. You are committing suicide. The elder of the Blood Moon sect sneered. When he finished his words, an enchanting force entered Yi Qingtang's ears. The voice was like a ghost that deluded her. The elder of the Blood Moon sect appeared to be extremely strong and frightening all of a sudden. Chapter 267. Under the oppression, the elder of the Blood Moon sect appeared more frightening. His power was like a huge mountain that could not be reached. Yi Qingtang froze. The weird feeling was attacking her again. However, she bit her tongue at the same time, and the stabbing pain made her regain consciousness. This time, she did not hesitate anymore. She pushed herself off the ground. When she flew backward, she released the pocket arrows. 3 light beams flew out of her sleeves. The elder frowned and lifted his hand to crush the 3 arrows. The next second, his figure flashed and appeared in front of Yi Qingtang. The dried hand smashed towards the top of her head. Yi Qingtang was stunned. Based on her instinct that was trained for years, she raised her sword instantly to defend the fatal attack. The elder's hand smashed onto her sword, and the sword broke into pieces within a second. Yi Qingtang backed off immediately. Her hand was numb from the vibration. The elder dashed forward as he missed the first attack. Yi Qingtang took out the sword that belonged to the youth of the Wind Moon sect almost instinctively. Her hand flipped and slashed the sword towards the elder. The elder of the Blood Moon sect sneered and smashed down his hand. Clank! A sound exploded by Yi Qingtang's ears. However, the force of the attack was absorbed by the sword. The entire sword remained in one piece without a single crack. Yi Qingtang's eyes sparkled. She then realized that the sword of the Wind Moon sect was extremely tough. She could not even feel the weight of the sword, and there was a streak of warmth channeling to her palm through the handle. Yi Qingtang felt delighted. The sword that she used previously was assigned to outer sect disciples. It was of the lowest quality. However, the one in her hand was not a normal sword. Yi Qingtang encountered many powerful weapons in her previous life as well. The Qingxian sword that she held some time ago was a rare powerful weapon. Normal swords could never be compared with her sword. The youth of the Wind Moon sect was extremely talented. Since he could enter the inner sect at such a young age, his sword must be special as well. Yi Qingtang felt more confident as she was able to block the elder's attack. Her eyesight was fierce, and she focused on the fighting again. The elder of the Blood Moon sect was surprised. When he saw Yi Qingtang attacking towards him, his sight changed, and he smashed his hand towards her body. The wind howled. Yi Qingtang jumped off the ground and pierced her sharp sword towards the elder of the Blood Moon sect's chest. The elder of the Blood Moon sect immediately raised his hand and smashed towards Yi Qingtang's shoulder. It was too late for her to pull off. She faced the attack straight and found a chance in between to pierce her sword down. The image of the disciple being smashed into pieces by the elder was still in her head. However, she could not care about so much now. As the elder's hand landed on her shoulder, her sword also pierced through his dried skin at the same time. Chapter 268. The elder's face suddenly changed at the next second. He pulled back immediately to avoid Yi Qingtang's sword piercing through his body. Yi Qingtang's attack did hurt the elder of the Blood Moon sect, but it did not meet her expectations. She frowned as she landed. However, she felt the pain from her shoulder and turned to look at it instinctively. The clothes on her shoulder were dyed red by blood, but she suddenly felt delighted. It seemed like it was not as terrible as what she imagined. Yi Qingtang covered the wound on her shoulder. Though it was injured severely by the elder's hand, this was totally incomparable to the pain of the disciple who was smashed into pieces previously. A shocking thought emerged in her brain. She raised her head and stared at the elder of the Blood Moon sect. Her eyes were fierce. Without any hesitation, she raised her sword and dashed forward again. The elder of the Blood Moon sect struck back immediately. The moment when Yi Qingtang approached the elder, she lowered her body and lifted up her left arm. She pierced her sword directly at the elder's abdomen area while her arm resisted the elder's smash. The elder of the Blood Moon sect smashed his hand down, but he felt a stabbing pain by his waist. He was stunned and backed off. Yi Qingtang hunched her body and looked at the arm that was smashed by the elder. She rolled up her sleeves and stared at the blue-black area on her arm. It was very obvious on her white skin. However, Yi Qingtang sneered as she saw the blue-black area on her arm. She raised her head and looked towards the elder of the Blood Moon sect, who was astonished. It was not her illusion. She was correct. Yi Qingtang had previously suspected that the elder of the Blood Moon sect was bluffing. He should not need to use the enchanting voice to delude the disciples with his full power. However, Yi Qingtang gave up on this thought when she witnessed the disciple being smashed into pieces. However, the first attack smashed her sword, but the strength of the next two was weakening. Yi Qingtang straightened her body and smiled. It seemed like the elder of the Blood Moon sect just came back to life not long ago. His strength had not recovered yet. Everything just now was done by the enchanting voice to delude people. The few attacks had used up all the strength that he recovered. The elder of the Blood Moon sect froze as he looked at Yi Qingtang's smiling face. "Little girl, you are quite talented and brave. Today, I'll let you go." The elder of the Blood Moon sect then wanted to leave. However, Yi Qingtang had figured out that he was just bluffing. How could she just let him go away now? She jumped in front of the elder and stabbed her sword towards his face. The elder opened his eyes wide. He did not expect to meet such a weird disciple. His enchanting voice did not work on her at all. This person was insane. She dared to challenge him even when she knew that he was the elder of the Blood Moon sect. Chapter 269. The essence spirit that the elder of the Blood Moon sect absorbed from the disciples was not enough to fill his powerful body. The strength he recovered was just 1 out of 1,000%. Everything was going according to the elder's plan. His enchanting voice could delude the disciples and make them lose their fighting ability. He then threatened everyone with that smash. However, Yi Qingtang showed up midway. Suddenly, the elder's face was extremely unpleasant. His essence spirit was not enough to support his strength. This time, the elder of the Blood Moon sect was in a real dilemma. Yi Qingtang had figured out his disguise. Now with the sword in her hand, she could use the skill she had accumulated for 300 years in her previous life to beat the elder even though her cultivated spirit energy was not strong enough. Almost instantly, The elder's body was full of cuts. Even though there was no blood dripping, the pain was obvious. The longer the fight was, the more the essence spirit he used. He was becoming weaker and weaker. He could fight with Yi Qingtang for a few rounds previously, but now, he was panting heavily from Yi Qingtang's attacks. The Elder of the Blood Moon sect knew that he would definitely lose if he continued the fight. He immediately used the last essence spirit in his body and shouted towards Yi Qingtang. "How dare you!" The roar was mixed with strong diluting effects. Yi Qingtang's body froze when she heard that. The Elder of the Blood Moon sect then ran away immediately during the gap. However, Yi Qingtang was only stunned for a moment. The presence of the heart of the demon god allowed her to regain consciousness soon. She narrowed her eyes as she saw the Elder of the Blood Moon sect, who was 100 meters away. She stepped onto the wall and took a leap. The sword in her hand was thrown out fiercely. The sword appeared to be a streak of light under the moonlight and shot towards the Elder of the Blood Moon sect directly. The Elder of the Blood Moon sect could sense the cool air from his back. He wanted to dodge, but the speed of the sword was too fast. It pierced through his abdomen instantly. The great force of impact brought him down to the ground, and he was pinned to the ground as the head of the sword landed. The Elder's dried face was full of astonishment. What happened? Why did his enchanting voice not work on the young lady? Though he was pinned onto the ground, it was not enough for him to die. When he was about to pull out the sword from his body, Yi Qingtang walked to him silently. There was an evil smile on that delicate face, which made the Elder of the Blood Moon sect shiver. Trying to run? Not so easy, huh? Yi Qingtang smiled at the confounded elder. She held the handle of the sword and pushed downward heavily. Puff! Chapter 270. What do you want? The elder's face was stiff. He could never imagine that one day, as the Elder of the Blood Moon sect, he would be defeated by a sect disciple. What do I want? Yi Qingtang lifted her eyebrows and smiled at the Elder of the Blood Moon sect, who appeared very insidious. She knocked her fingers on the handle of the sword. The subtle vibration was transmitted to the Elder's body through the sword. Though he would not be dead as there was no blood loss, the pain was extremely sharp. Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes and bent her body lower. She stared at the red eyes of the Elder and suddenly said, "Submission or death?" The Elder's face immediately darkened. How familiar the sentence was to him. That was what he said to the disciples of the Xianling sect previously. "You dare to ask me to succumb? I am the Elder of the Blood Moon sect. You are nobody. How dare you to R." The Elder of the Blood Moon sect was still cursing, but the next second, Yi Qingtang just turned the handle of the sword. The moment the edge of the sword was spinning in the body, the Elder of the Blood Moon sect screamed in pain as his flesh was cut through by the sword. Yi Qingtang just continued smiling at the Elder, who held his fist tightly. "How? If you don't want to choose, I can help you. If I chop your head off and bring it back to the sect, I think I will get quite a lot of rewards." Disciples from all sects were murdered by the Elder of the Blood Moon sect. Now, every sect was investigating the truth. It would be an amazing achievement to kill an Elder of the Blood Moon sect. The Elder's face was extremely dark. He could never imagine that a disciple of an orthodox sect would be so cruel as well. The sinister look in her eyes made the Elder of the Blood Moon sect suspect that this girl was an undercover of some evil sect. His influence in the past terrified all sects. However, he was forced to succumb to a sect disciple who appeared to be so vulnerable. He had never imagined such shame before. Yi Qingtang was not in a rush, but her hands turned the sword slowly. The Elder was full of cold sweat from the pain, and there was no single trace of cruelty on him from when he killed the disciples previously. Actually, Yi Qingtang never intended to kill the Elder of the Blood Moon sect. Even if she wanted to, she could not break the evil ability he had that kept him immortal. Handing over the Elder of the Blood Moon sect to the sect? She did not even think of that at all. The heretic spirits that were suppressed were coming back to life now. They would be alive soon. Which sect dared to lock up an Elder of the Blood Moon sect when it was so strong now? This was like asking the Blood Moon sect to eliminate all the other sects. She could not kill him or hand him over. Thus, she had another thought. Even though the elder of the Blood Moon sect was useless now, when his power was fully recovered, he would be a horrifying presence then. If she could use that power for herself, would it not be a great advantage for her? Yi Qingtang had quite a few thoughts as she waited for the elder to take the bait. However, her face was still filled with the evil smile that made the elder of the Blood Moon sect panic, as if she would kill him anytime according to her mood. It took him so much effort to regain his consciousness. If he was severely injured again, it would take at least 1,000 years to recover. Chapter 271 now. The elder's mouth shivered. He bared with the pain and forced an ugly smile out. We can discuss. We can discuss. I'm willing to succumb to you and serve you. The elder pledged his loyalty, but his eyes were evil. As long as he could escape, he would see what the girl could do to him then. Yi Qingtang smiled as she heard his words. That's right. She chuckled and pulled out the sword slightly. The elder of the Blood Moon sect stared at the sword that was slowly pulled out from his body. He concentrated all his energy and was ready to escape once Yi Qingtang pulled out the sword. However, the nervousness that was shown in his eyes was captured by Yi Qingtang. The instant when the sword was about to be pulled out, Yi Qingtang turned her hands and pushed downwards. The sword was pierced back again. The sharp pain immediately spread through his body, and the elder of the Blood Moon sect was full of cold sweat. His teeth trembled, and he stared at Yi Qingtang. When he met with Yi Qingtang's complex sight, he instantly hid all the malice in his eyes. What is this for? I have succumbed to you, right? The elder forced a smile. Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes slightly and smiled. You are right, but, to be safe, I think we should have a contract. Then, if you want to run away, I will not need to waste my energy to chase you back. The elder of the Blood Moon sect cursed Yi Qingtang in his heart as he heard her ironic words. His eyes revealed his guilty conscience. Yi Qingtang really predicted his intention. However, the elder of the Blood Moon sect would not reveal his thoughts so easily. He smiled and said, How will I run away when I can't even beat you? You think too much. Is it? You're not wrong. But the contract serves as insurance, right? Yi Qingtang lifted her brows, but she showed a more splendid smile. The elder of the Blood Moon sect cursed Yi Qingtang for being so cunning secretly, but he did not dare to say anything. Though he was still pinned to the ground, he was full of plans to escape. If the contract was completed, he would never be able to hurt Yi Qingtang anymore, as he would be killed by the contract. Unless, he could kill her instantly so that it would not trigger the contract. However, he could not achieve that based on his current situation. Under the elder's desperate sight, Yi Qingtang lifted her hand and bit her fingertip. A drop of blood came out of her finger. She immediately touched the elder's blood moon at the glabella with the finger. The elder's body trembled. The moment when the blood diffused into the skin, the contract was completed. Yi Qingtang pulled out the sword after the contract was done. The elder of the Blood Moon sect sat up when he regained his freedom, but he felt brain dead. He was forced to complete a contract with a sect disciple. The thought of escaping was totally out of his mind now. His energy was greatly depleted during the fight previously, and the body that just recovered could not take it anymore. If he escaped now, the body would decay soon. Furthermore, he made a contract with Yi Qingtang. What difference would it make now if he escaped? Chapter 271. One sponsored content. The elder of the Blood Moon sect sighed, but his eyes showed a trace of cunning. The contract would only limit him for the time being. When his power was fully recovered, it would be easy to kill a sect disciple within a second. The contract would not be triggered on time, and he would be free from the contract. The elder's mood was slightly better. He stood up and looked at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang sensed the cunning look from the elder. She clearly knew the key of the contract. It was a double-edged sword to have a contract with the elder of the Blood Moon sect. Since she dared to sign the contract, she would never give any chance for the elder to kill her in a second. Sponsored content. She must be more powerful soon. My name is Enchanting. You will follow me in the future, Enchanting said. The elder's mouth shivered, but he eventually accepted the situation. However, he rolled his eyes and said, You are a sect disciple. It's not very appropriate for me to follow you with this body, right? Enchanting sized up his body. If he followed her with this dried-up corpse, they would be killed if they met any Orthodox people. She did not need to imagine returning to the sect. What's your thought? Enchanting asked. The elder contemplated for a while, hid the trace of cunning in his eyes, and said, I will be a burden to you with this body. But if I can change a body, that will be fine. Sponsored content. Change a body? Enchanting frowned but did not say anything. The elder noticed that she hesitated and immediately added, There were quite a few sect disciples there just now. The youth is a good choice. I can follow you in the future if I take over his body. Enchanting remembered how the elder wanted to kill the youth of the Wind Moon sect, and her face clouded instantly. No. The elder gritted his teeth. If he can't, I can take your senior brother's body as well. It will be more convenient for me to follow you. I think the young man who leads the team is not bad. He was referring to Dai Changming. Enchanting shook her head. How about the handsome young man? I think he is suitable as well. The elder suggested again. Enchanting gave him a cold glance. How dare him suggest to take over her senior brother Qin's body? Sponsored content. Don't even think about it. The elder of the Blood Moon sect opened his mouth but was speechless. Was he going to follow her with this dried-up body? Enchanting noticed that as well, but she could never allow him to take those innocent disciples' bodies. However, a figure suddenly appeared in her brain. She showed an evil smile and said, I can provide you with one person. You asked the zombies to bring the strongest man over. The elder of the Blood Moon sect did not know who Enchanting picked, but he still gave the order to the zombies at the square with mind control. It was dead silent at the square. Everyone's face was extremely unpleasant as the blood fog spread around. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 271. Chapter 275. The Contract. 3. Sponsored content. Zhou Chu squatted at the corner of the cage. He stared at Qin Huan, who constantly looked outside, and said in a weird tone, Qin Huan, don't dream about it anymore. That is the elder of the Blood Moon sect. Enchanting will never be qualified to be his opponent. She'll definitely be dead when the elder digs out her heart. She doesn't even know her own ability. If she hid away, she would not have such consequences. Qin Huan turned his head and stared at Zhou Chu. If Dai Changming had not stopped him, he would have beaten Zhou Chu to death. They belonged to the same sect, but Zhou Chu wanted Enchanting to be dead all the time. Don't waste your time worrying about her. You should think about how to escape now. When the elder of the Blood Moon sect finishes eating her heart, he will return to kill us again, Zhou Chu said. Qin Huan held his fists tightly. Sponsored content. I was too nervous just now and forgot to crush the soft jade. The sect elders should be nearby. It may not be too late if we crush the soft jade now, Dai Changming said. Qin Huan said coldly, there's no need for that. Junior sister, ye had crushed the soft jade when we saw the elder of the Blood Moon sect. If the elders are around, they should be on their way now. What? Dai Changming was stunned. Enchanting could still remain that calm at that kind of moment? Zhou Chu's eyes sparkled as he heard the news. She still has some use then. Luckily, she came to get killed so that she could buy us some time. Hope the elders can reach us as soon as possible, Zhou Chu said. Sponsored content. Everyone stared at him in rage. Qin Huan was about to kick his face. However, the zombies suddenly moved. They opened the cage which Qin Huan and rest were in. They pulled the strongest Zhou Chu out of the corner. Zhou Chu's face was pale. He held the bars of the cage tightly, and cold sweat was flowing down his head. Senior brother Dai. Help me. Help me. Dai Changming was stunned and wanted to reach for him instinctively. However, Qin Huan stopped him. Qin Huan stood in front of Dai Changming and stared at Zhou Chu, whose face was totally pale. Zhou Chu, you're right. If you can buy us some time, we may survive. Thus, we will hand over the task to you. Qin Huan kicked Zhou Chu's hands away from the bars, and Zhou Chu was pulled out by the zombies. Dai Changming frowned but did not move anymore. The other disciples who witnessed the scene surprisingly did not speak at all. Zhou Chu hid at the back for the whole time. It was obvious that he wanted the rest to die first. However, he never imagined that he would be the first one to die. Sponsored content. Zhou Chu cried and screamed. He was dragged away by the zombies towards the walls of Deer City through the dark path. Zhou Chu struggled and screamed along the way. However, his arms were held tightly by the zombies. It was impossible for him to escape. Zhou Chu was brought to the walls in a short while. His whole body was soaked with cold sweat, and his legs were trembling. When he lifted his eyes, he was shocked when he saw Yi Qingtang, who was standing a few steps away. Yi Qingtang? She is not dead? Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 272. The Elder of the Blood Moon sect sighed, but his eyes showed a trace of cunning. The contract would only limit him for the time being. When his power was fully recovered, it would be easy to kill a sect disciple within a second. The contract would not be triggered on time, and he would be free from the contract. The Elder's mood was slightly better. He stood up and looked at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang sensed the cunning look from the Elder. She clearly knew the key of the contract. It was a double-edged sword to have a contract with the Elder of the Blood Moon sect. Since she dared to sign the contract, she would never give any chance for the Elder to kill her in a second. She must be more powerful soon. My name is Yi Qingtang. You will follow me in the future, Yi Qingtang said. The Elder's mouth shivered, but he eventually accepted the situation. However, he rolled his eyes and said, "You are a sect disciple. It's not very appropriate for me to follow you with this body, right?" Yi Qingtang sized up his body. If he followed her with this dried-up corpse, they would be killed if they met any Orthodox people. She did not need to imagine returning to the sect. "What's your thought?" Yi Qingtang asked. The Elder contemplated for a while, hid the trace of cunning in his eyes, and said, "I will be a burden to you with this body. But if I can change a body, that will be fine." Change a body? Yi Qingtang frowned but did not say anything. The Elder noticed that she hesitated and immediately added, "There were quite a few sect disciples there just now. The youth is a good choice. I can follow you in the future if I take over his body." Yi Qingtang remembered how the Elder wanted to kill the youth of the Wind Moon sect, and her face clouded instantly. "No." The Elder gritted his teeth. "If he can't, I can take your senior brother's body as well. It will be more convenient for me to follow you. I think the young man who leads the team is not bad." He was referring to Dai Changming. Yi Qingtang shook her head. "How about the handsome young man? I think he is suitable as well." The Elder suggested again. Yi Qingtang gave him a cold glance. How dare him suggest to take over her senior brother Qin's body? Don't even think about it. The Elder of the Blood Moon sect opened his mouth but was speechless. Was he going to follow her with this dried-up body? Yi Qingtang noticed that as well, but she could never allow him to take those innocent disciples' bodies. However, a figure suddenly appeared in her brain. She showed an evil smile and said, "I can provide you with one person. You asked the zombies to bring the strongest man over." The Elder of the Blood Moon sect did not know who Yi Qingtang picked, but he still gave the order to the zombies at the square with mind control. It was dead silent at the square. Everyone's face was extremely unpleasant as the blood fog spread around. Chapter 273. Zhou Chu squatted at the corner of the cage. He stared at Qin Huan, who constantly looked outside, and said in a weird tone, "Qin Huan, don't dream about it anymore. That is the Elder of the Blood Moon sect. Yi Qingtang will never be qualified to be his opponent. She'll definitely be dead when the Elder digs out her heart. She doesn't even know her own ability. If she hid away, she would not have such consequences." Qin Huan turned his head and stared at Zhou Chu. If Dai Changming had not stopped him, he would have beaten Zhou Chu to death. They belonged to the same sect, but Zhou Chu wanted Yi Qingtang to be dead all the time. Don't waste your time worrying about her. You should think about how to escape now. When the Elder of the Blood Moon sect finishes eating her heart, he will return to kill us again, Zhou Chu said. Qin Huan held his fists tightly. I was too nervous just now and forgot to crush the soft jade. The sect elders should be nearby. It may not be too late if we crush the soft jade now, Dai Changming said. Qin Huan said coldly, there's no need for that. Junior sister, ye had crushed the soft jade when we saw the elder of the Blood Moon sect. If the elders are around, they should be on their way now. What? Dai Changming was stunned. Yi Qingtang could still remain that calm at that kind of moment? Zhou Chu's eyes sparkled as he heard the news. She still has some use then. Luckily, she came to get killed so that she could buy us some time. Hope the elders can reach us as soon as possible, Zhou Chu said. Everyone stared at him in rage. Qin Huan was about to kick his face. However, the zombies suddenly moved. They opened the cage which Qin Huan and rest were in. They pulled the strongest Zhou Chu out of the corner. Zhou Chu's face was pale. He held the bars of the cage tightly, and cold sweat was flowing down his head. Senior brother Dai. Help me. Help me. Dai Changming was stunned and wanted to reach for him instinctively. However, Qin Huan stopped him. Qin Huan stood in front of Dai Changming and stared at Zhou Chu, whose face was totally pale. Zhou Chu, you're right. If you can buy us some time, we may survive. Thus, we will hand over the task to you. Qin Huan kicked Zhou Chu's hands away from the bars, and Zhou Chu was pulled out by the zombies. Dai Changming frowned but did not move anymore. The other disciples who witnessed the scene surprisingly did not speak at all. Zhou Chu hid at the back for the whole time. It was obvious that he wanted the rest to die first. However, he never imagined that he would be the first one to die. Zhou Chu cried and screamed. He was dragged away by the zombies towards the walls of Deer City through the dark path. Zhou Chu struggled and screamed along the way. However, his arms were held tightly by the zombies. It was impossible for him to escape. Zhou Chu was brought to the walls in a short while. His whole body was soaked with cold sweat, and his legs were trembling. When he lifted his eyes, he was shocked when he saw Yi Qingtang, who was standing a few steps away. Yi Qingtang? She is not dead? Chapter 274. Zhou Chu originally thought that Yi Qingtang would definitely be dead after the Blood Moon sect elder chased after her. Yet, unexpectedly, Yi Qingtang was actually standing before him, well and alive. In just a moment, Zhou Chu shouted, Yi Qingtang, why are you still standing over there? Come and save me. Yi Qingtang stood rooted to the ground calmly and looked at the loud Zhou Chu with a faint smile. Yi Qingtang, why are you spacing out? You're a coward who only knows how to escape. Kill these two zombies. If the sect knows that you ignored the safety of other senior brothers in the sect and fled on your own, you'll definitely be expelled out of the sect. Zhou Chu frowned deeply as he struggled while barking loudly. However, such seemingly upright scolding was somehow funny when it came out from his mouth. Yi Qingtang tilted her head slightly and looked at Zhou Chu, who barked incessantly. Zhou Chu, I did not flee on my own. Am I not here to rescue all my senior brothers now? Zhou Chu was slightly surprised and immediately shouted, then quickly get over here to save me. However, Yi Qingtang only looked at Zhou Chu smilingly. Zhou Chu was going to yell again, but a figure suddenly appeared beside Yi Qingtang. With just a look, all his previous craziness vanished immediately. All color faded from his face, and his legs wobbled when he saw the Blood Moon sect elder beside Yi Qingtang. The Blood Moon sect elder's eyes fell on Zhou Chu and sized up the sect disciple before him. Then, his brows were furrowed, and dissatisfaction emerged in his eyes. He looked at Yi Qingtang and said, the person you chose for me is him? His physical constitution is too lousy already. Zhou Chu was stunned. What did that mean? Yi Qingtang cast the Blood Moon sect elder a look and replied casually, that's him. Take it or leave it. The Blood Moon sect elder's lips twitched. At that instant, He did not have any room for being choosy. As the two people talked, Zhou Chu suddenly realized something. His eyes widened, and he glared at Yi Qingtang furiously. Yi Qingtang, you actually submitted to the Blood Moon sect. As a sect disciple, do you even care about the sect's honor? You're utterly shameless. Zhou Chu snarled in fear and uneasiness. No one knew that if he had an option, he would rather replace Yi Qingtang's position. As long as the Blood Moon sect elder did not kill him, he would be willing to do anything that the Blood Moon sect elder told him to. Yi Qingtang raised a brow at Zhou Chu, who was as miserable as a mad dog. She glanced at the Blood Moon sect elder from the corner of her eyes, and her lips curled up slightly. Submit? She chuckled. Zhou Chu, you've got it wrong. I am his master. With that, Zhou Chu was completely frozen. While the expression of Blood Moon sect elder beside her darkened, considering that he could not defeat Yi Qingtang, the elder could only force himself to forego his face and confirmed. That's right. I will listen to Lord Yes' arrangements for everything. What even? Zhou Chu stretched his neck out, and his entire body trembled. His popped eyes stared at the smiling Yi Qingtang. At that instant, her exquisite face was like a nightmare which devoured his soul. Moss Master, who exactly are you? Zhou Chu panicked. Never would he have expected that her reply would be this unimaginable. Yi Qingtang is the Blood Moon sect elder's master? How could this be? Zhou Chu was simply unwilling to believe everything, but the Blood Moon sect elder's behavior was completely like that of a servant. There was no way Zhou Chu could deny it. Chapter 275. In an instant, Zhou Chu collapsed. His face turned extremely pale, and the expression he used to look at Yi Qingtang turned into boundless fear. Junior sister. No. Lord Yi, I am wrong. I failed to recognize your formidability and spouted nonsense. Just treat me as a fart. I beg you to let me off, please. I will definitely work as a slave for you. I will do anything you ask of me. Zhou Chu was utterly shocked. At this instant, Zhou Chu finally realized how foolish he had been. How scary was Yi Qingtang's identity for her to be able to be the Blood Moon sect elder's master? Could it be that she was even the Blood Moon sect's holy lady? At that thought, Zhou Chu was already frightened out of his wits. If he knew this before, he would definitely not dare to offend Yi Qingtang no matter what. Zhou Chu begged in tears. If not for the fact that he was held by the two zombies, he would probably have kowtowed to Yi Qingtang and begged for mercy. Yi Qingtang looked coldly at Zhou Chu, who was covered in tears and mucus. There was not a trace of pity in her eyes. Do anything I ask of you? Why? Are you not going to seek revenge for your older brother Zhou Xian? Yi Qingtang raised a brow. Zhou Chu immediately shook his head like a rattle drum and frantically said, My brother brought it to himself. Spare my life, Lord Yi. I really did not oppose you on purpose. It's all the inner sect Ning Luo's idea. He was the one who made me and my brother find a chance to get rid of you. It really has nothing to do with me. I am wrong. Zhou Chu wailed and directly pushed all the blame to Ning Luo, not daring to say that he had personal motives for opposing Yi Qingtang initially. Ning Luo? Yi Qingtang frowned. She had heard of Ning Luo's name in her previous life. He was the top genius in the inner sect of Xinling sect and was also the favorite disciple of the inner sect sword faction's elder. He was extremely talented. However, Yi Qingtang did not cross paths with him in both her previous and current lifetimes. Now, she had only entered Xinling's sect for a few months. Why was it that Ning Luo suddenly targeted her? Yi Qingtang could not find an answer no matter how she thought. Zhou Chu saw Yi Qingtang's reaction and said hurriedly, as though he clutched the last straw which could save his life, It's all Ning Luo. Right after you passed the sect assessment, Ning Luo sent someone to my brother and told him to kill you somehow. My brother and I are only outer sect disciples, but Ning Luo was an inner sect elite. Obviously, we didn't dare to disobey his orders. Thus, we offended you. Please spare my life. Yi Qingtang looked down. After thinking over and over, she still did not know when she bred enmity with Ning Luo. However, Yi Qingtang looked up and fixed her eyes on Zhou Chu again. Her lips suddenly curled into a smile. So I accused you? Zhou Chu swallowed his saliva, and his heart palpitated violently. Yi Qingtang said, since it is so, I'll give you a chance. Zhou Chu widened his eyes, and hope filled his eyes. Then, Yi Qingtang looked away and continued. I'll give you a chance to become a Blood Moon sect elder. Once Yi Qingtang finished her sentence, Zhou Chu gasped, and an ominous feeling rose within him. In the next second, Yi Qingtang darted a look at the Blood Moon sect elder who had been waiting for a long time. Now, his body is yours. No. Zhou Chu screamed in horror as the Blood Moon sect elder took a step forward and appeared before Zhou Chu. Chapter 276. The dry, savage face of the Blood Moon sect elder was suddenly reflected in Zhou Chu's fearful eyes. The Blood Moon sect elder placed a hand on top of Zhou Chu's and held it tightly. Opening its mouth wide, blood fog suddenly emitted out from the Blood Moon sect elder's mouth and entered Zhou Chu's eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. As the blood fog gradually entered Zhou Chu's body, the Blood Moon sect elder's eye lost its insidious glint, and the dried body fell on the ground with a loud sound. While the horror on Zhou Chu's face suddenly disappeared, the two zombies beside him released their hold on him instantly. Zhou Chu frowned slightly. Looking at his hands, he took a deep breath, and the blood fog that lingered on his face was absorbed into the body. When he looked up, his eyes no longer contained despair and was replaced with a solemn expression instead. A blood crescent symbol appeared between his brows. Yi Qingtang watched this strange scene, and after noticing that the expression in Zhou Chu's eyes changed, she knew that the Zhou Chu before her was already possessed by the Blood Moon sect elder. This person's endowment is inferior, and his body is too lousy. Despise was written all over the Blood Moon sect elder's face. Although he changed into a living and muscular body, this person's body was exasperatingly lousy when compared to the young boy from Wind Moon sect whom he had his eyes on previously. Be contented, Yi Qingtang said while folding her arms. If Zhou Chu was not here, she really would not be able to find an unlucky person for the Blood Moon sect elder to possess. The Blood Moon sect elder touched his face and calmed down a little after feeling that this body was, at least, much more supple than that dried corpse. This person is called Zhou Chu, and he's an outer sect disciple of Xinling sect. He had an older brother previously, but the brother is already dead. You only need to follow me using his identity. Yi Qingtang ordered the Blood Moon sect elder. The Blood Moon sect elder listened obediently. The dried corpse that had lost a soul laid on the ground silently. The Blood Moon sect elder looked at his previous body emotionlessly. He bent down, removed some belongings from the corpse, and took out a revolving soul orb that was about the size of a palm from his cloak. That revolving soul orb looked crystal clear, but there was a clump of fog in the orb, while its top and bottom ends each had a dragon claw of which the entire orb was set between. When the Blood Moon sect elder saw this revolving soul orb, his heart wavered. He put on a casual act and brought it to Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang looked at the object in the Blood Moon sect elder's hand questioningly. What is this? The Blood Moon sect elder replied. This is the revolving soul orb and is one of the secret treasures of the Blood Moon sect. It can absorb the essence in the world and transfer it for the holder to absorb. It is a weapon to raise one's cultivation. Since there's a contract between us, I'll just gift this to you. Yi Qingtang raised a brow slightly. Was he so kind? How do I use this thing? Yi Qingtang took the revolving soul orb over and inspected it. The Blood Moon sect elder replied. You must be at the peak of martial qi level 2 to use this item. Yi Qingtang's interest was initially piqued as she felt that this revolving soul orb was a treasure that was hard to come by. But when she heard the words martial qi level 2, the interest in her heart vanished completely. Peak of martial qi level 2? What was that concept? In terms of sects, normal outer sect disciples were at most Khanate level 9. Only by entering the inner sect to cultivate was one able to truly be exposed to the martial qi realm. Chapter 277. Martial Chi was a grade that only inner sect disciples possessed. There were 3 grades between Martial Chi Level 1 and Martial Chi Level 2, which were called First Heaven, Second Heaven, and Third Heaven. Between each of these 3 grades, there were 3 stages. Advancing from each stage was extremely difficult. In Shinling Sect, those who could reach this realm most likely were only the inner sect elders who were in charge of internal affairs. He was truly someone the status of a Blood Moon sect elder. Even though he had been miserable for thousands of years, a casual item he took out was already a Martial Chi Level 2 treasure. Yi Qingtang lived for 300 over years in her previous life, and she was already at the Paragon level when she suffered a downfall. She had seen many of such treasures and obviously knew how beneficial this item was to people at the peak of Martial Chi Level 2. However, it was useless to the current Yi Qingtang, and she could only keep it for future use. Thank you then. Yi Qingtang kept the revolving soul orb. Don't mention about it. This is what I should do. I can't use this item for now, and there's no use leaving it aside. The Blood Moon sect elder was elated when he saw Yi Qingtang keeping the revolving soul orb. This revolving soul orb was indeed as powerful as what he said, but it had a disadvantage. The revolving soul orb would absorb the essence in the world continuously, and if the essence was not absorbed by someone for a long time, the essence would exceed the revolving soul orb's capacity and explode. The Blood Moon sect elder narrowed his eyes slightly and hid away the sly look in his eyes. He was destined to be unable to kill Yi Qingtang right now because of the contract between them, but if she died from the revolving soul orb's explosion, it would be completely unrelated to him. When she died, the contract would naturally be nullified, and he could regain his freedom. The Blood Moon sect elder planned out everything well in his heart, though his face did not reveal anything. Get rid of your corpse. You're Zhou Chu from now on, Yi Qingtang said. Your corpse. The Blood Moon sect elder's lips twitched but still obediently picked up his dried corpse and absorbed all the remaining energy. This dried corpse had been in existence for thousands of years, and it was the Blood Moon sect elder's power which allowed the corpse to maintain its current appearance. Now that it lost its very last remnants of energy, the corpse quickly turned into ash and vanished along with the wind. Yi Qingtang nodded at the sight and led the Blood Moon sect elder towards the square where the disciples were locked up at. As she walked, she added on, "Get rid of the blood fog around the city. You cannot touch those people in the square anymore." The Blood Moon sect elder accepted the orders in obedience, but sneered internally. "They'll let you order me around now. When that revolving soul orb explodes." In the square, the people in despair looked at the red light that filled the sky, and the shadow of death remained in their eyes. Qin Huan sat in the cage distraughtly as he pulled his hair. Regret was written all over his face. "I should not have brought junior sister Yi here. It's all my fault. I brought harm onto her." At that moment, Qin Huan was extremely regretful. Had he known how dangerous this trip was, he would definitely not agree to bring Yi Qingtang along. It was ultimately too late now. Dai Changming sighed quietly. Under such circumstances, all of them had become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Dai Changming glanced across the bloody scene around him, but his eyes were suddenly attracted by 2 figures not far away. He suddenly widened his eyes and patted the regretful Qin Huan. "Junior brother Qin, take a look quickly. Who is that?" Qin Huan looked up with a weary expression, but was utterly stunned from the sight. He rushed forward and clutched on the metal cage tightly. Shock filled his eyes when he saw the figure that was nearing them. "Junior sister Yi, you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."